The kitchen was suffocating, thick with butter and turkey fat, when my stepmother's hand struck my ribs. Right as the oven ticked, my father only looked up from the timer and said, "Turkey's burning." That was the moment I knew they would never see me, and it was the moment I decided this whole house would finally see themselves in the blinding light of the truth. My name is Rowan Ellison. I am in my late 20s, and I analyze data for a living at a place called Kestrel Impact Labs. It is a job that requires me to find patterns in chaos, to see the connections that other people miss. It is a skill I learned not in New York, where I now live, but here, in the suffocating, perfectly decorated suburbs of Stonebridge. I came back for Thanksgiving, a 3-hour train ride into a past I usually keep locked away. The moment I stepped inside, the heat hit me, not the comforting warmth of a holiday, but the humid, oppressive heat of a kitchen under siege. My stepmother, Marla Voss, was directing the scene. The kitchen was her stage, and we were her unwilling actors. "Tessa, darling, not there, by the rosemary plant. The light is better," Marla commanded, her voice a tense whisper designed to sound like a suggestion. "Graham, for heaven's sake, look like you are actually basting that bird, not attacking it." Marla lives for this, the curated reality of her social media, where every holiday is a portfolio of domestic perfection. She was already dressed in a cream-colored cashmere sweater. Not a drop of food on it. She demanded everyone stand in their light, moving us around like furniture for the perfect, candid shot of family togetherness. My father, Graham Ellison, was hunched over the stove. His focus was not on his family, but on the digital timer. He was a man who navigated life by avoiding conflict, and the turkey was his shield, its precise cooking schedule, which he had emailed to the family 2 days prior, was his only contribution to the day's emotional landscape. He answered Marla's directions with non-committal grunts, his eyes fixed on the clock. My half-sister, Tessa, was, as always, her mother's accessory. Her phone was up, panning across the counters in a glittering, filtered story for her followers. "Thanksgiving prep vibes," she narrated, capturing the steam rising from the pots, the artfully arranged bowls of ingredients Marla had laid out. She was filming, but she was not seeing. The air was thick with the smell of sage and melting butter, an aroma so heavy it felt like you could drown in it. The conflict, when it came, started over something laughably small. It always does. Marla turned to me, a frothy, lace-trimmed apron held out in her manicured hands. "Rowan, put this on. We need to synchronize the color story. It is a warm beige." I looked down at my simple black sweater. I was peeling potatoes, a task assigned to me to keep me in the corner, out of the primary shots. "I am fine, Marla. I am just peeling potatoes. I will not spill anything." "Do not be difficult," she hissed, the smile she wore for Tessa's camera vanishing the second the lens panned away. "It is for the photo. We are a family. We match." "I do not want to wear the apron," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I turned back to the sink. That was when she moved. It was fast. It was not a discussion. It was a correction. Her hand clamped around my upper arm, her nails digging in. I said, "Put it on." She yanked me, hard. She is stronger than she looks, fueled by a brittle, anxious rage. The pull threw me off balance. I stumbled back, colliding with the massive stainless steel oven. The main door was open just a crack, venting heat. My shoulder and the back of my arm slammed into the searing hot metal edge. A sharp electric pain shot through me. I hissed, pulling away, my hand flying to the spot. It was not just a bump, it was a burn. A bright red line was already rising on my skin. The flesh blistering almost instantly, a dull, throbbing ache radiating deep into the muscle beneath. The timer on the oven let out a piercing digital shriek. The kitchen went utterly silent. Even Tessa's phone lowered. My father, Graham, looked up. He did not look at me. He did not look at Marla's hand, still poised in the air. He did not look at the angry, weeping mark on my arm. He looked at the clock on the oven's display. "Turkey's burning," he announced to the room. He grabbed a pair of oven mitts, his entire focus shifting to the bird. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not acknowledge what had just happened. His daughter had been assaulted, burned, and his only comment was on the cooking time. The air in the room froze, solidified. The only sounds left were the mechanical, aggressive whir of the overhead exhaust fan and the sudden, loud sizzle and pop of fat dripping onto the hot element inside the oven. My own breathing sounded like a storm, loud and ragged in the vacuum. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted the sharp, coppery tang of blood. I stared at the dark, reflective glass of the oven door. I could see my own face reflected back, distorted by the heat waves, trapped in the polished steel frame. I looked like a ghost in my own home. Tessa's mouth opened. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a flicker of an emotion I could not, or perhaps would not, name. "Mom, Marla shot her a look. It was not a glance. It was a weapon. Sharp and precise. A look that said, 'You will be silent.'" Tessa's mouth snapped shut. She looked down at her feet, her curated world shattering for a brief second before she dutifully began rebuilding it, her silence a fresh layer of betrayal. I did not cry out. I did not scream. I did not give them the satisfaction of a reaction they could label as hysteria. Slowly, deliberately, I turned away from them all. I walked to the kitchen sink, pushed the faucet to full cold, and stuck my entire arm under the icy stream. The shock of the cold was a dull counterpoint to the fire in my skin. I watched the water run over the welt, which was already darkening, the edges turning a sickening purple. I dried my hands on a dish towel, my movements measured. I walked over to the granite island where my phone was charging. I unplugged it. I looked at the screen, then placed it face down on the counter. But as I did, my other hand, the one in my pocket, found my wireless earbud. I pressed the side button twice. A small, discreet light on my phone's dark screen blinked once, confirming. The microphone in the earbud was now live, feeding a high-quality audio stream directly to a secure file. I could still feel the radiating heat from the stove on my back. I could feel the throbbing pulse of the burn. They wanted me to be invisible, a prop, a shadow in their perfect picture. A thought, cold and clear and sharp as a shard of glass, settled into my mind. If they will not see me, if I am nothing more than background noise to them, then I will make the entire world see exactly what happens in this house. I will give them the data. I will show them the unedited, unfiltered truth. That cold water from the tap was a poor anesthetic for a burn, but it was a powerful trigger for memory. Standing there, listening to the hollow sound of water hitting porcelain. I was no longer in my late 20s. I was a child again, watching my father's car pull into the driveway with a woman who was not my mother. My mother had been gone for 2 years, lost to an illness that stole her voice before it took her life. Our house had become a quiet place of dust motes and unread books, smelling faintly of her vanilla perfume. Then Marla arrived. She was not a person. She was an event, a sudden weather system of bright, clashing colors, a laugh that was too loud for our quiet rooms, and the sharp, chemical scent of expensive hairspray. My mother had been a calming presence. Marla was a spotlight, and she physically could not tolerate sharing its beam. Graham, my father, was drawn to her brightness, relieved to have someone else fill the silences he was so afraid of. My childhood ended the day she moved in. My birthdays, which had once been quiet affairs with cake and a book I'd wanted, were transformed. She decided my 10th birthday needed to be a proper celebration. It became a catered garden party for 30 of her new friends and their children. I sat on the edge of the patio, a stranger at my own event. When it was time for gifts, Marla presented me with a large, beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a heavy, silver-plated desk set. "It is from your father's office," Marla announced proudly to her friends. "He gets the most wonderful corporate gifts." I looked at my father. He was already looking away, adjusting a sprinkler head. Later, I found the stack of identical boxes in his study, all bearing the logo of his financial firm, the corporate gift closet, for the next 8 years. My birthdays were marked by logo-branded fleeces, leather-bound planners for the wrong year, and sets of highball glasses. They were not gifts. They were inventory. They were proof that I was an obligation, not a daughter. 18 months after Marla's arrival, Tessa was born. Tessa was the do-over, the real child. She was a miniature Marla, bathed in praise for simply existing. Tessa's scribbles were artistic expression. My completed homework was in the way on the counter. While Tessa was praised for her charming personality, I became the useful shadow. I was the one who learned to fix things. When the internet router blinked its confusing orange light, it was not Graham who crawled under the desk with a flashlight. It was me, at 13, navigating reboot sequences. When the recessed lighting in the kitchen ceiling blew, I was the one balanced on the rickety stepladder with a replacement bulb, while Marla directed from below. Not that one, the one on the left. You are casting a shadow. I was utility. Tessa was ornamental. My function was to ensure the smooth operation of the house so that their lives could continue, uninterrupted. I retreated to the only place where my value was not subjective. School. I worked with a quiet, desperate ferocity. I excelled. I joined the math league, the debate club, the robotics team. In my junior year, I won the state science fair for a project on predictive modeling. I remember standing on the auditorium stage, the fluorescent lights hot, holding a large blue ribbon and an oversized check for $500. I searched the audience for the 2 seats that had been reserved for my family. They were empty. Graham had called an hour before. A last-minute client dinner he just could not get out of. Marla, I later learned, was at a spa day, a crucial pre-charity gala ritual. I stopped looking for them in the crowd after that. I stopped expecting them to show up. I cashed the check and used the money to buy a used laptop, a tool just for me, one that did not come from a corporate gift closet. This kitchen was always Marla's command center. It was the heart of her illusion. She understood the power of sensory propaganda. She baked constantly, not from a love of it, but for the smell. The scent of browning butter and cinnamon could mask a multitude of sins. The aroma of slow-roasting garlic could cover the reek of emotional neglect. This was the room where she polished the image of the Ellison family, a brand she was meticulously building. Every stainless steel appliance, every perfectly arranged bowl of fruit was a lie, a beautiful, fragrant, expensive lie. The architect of this illusion was Marla, but its chief enforcer was my father. His silence was the mortar that held the whole facade together. Graham's entire parenting philosophy could be distilled into one phrase: don't make a big deal. Marla forgot to pick me up from soccer practice, leaving me waiting in a thunderstorm for 2 hours. It was a simple mistake. Rowan, she has a lot on her mind. Don't make a big deal. Marla donated my mother's jewelry, the last physical pieces I had of her, to a charity auction without asking. She thought it was for the best, to help you move on. Let's not make a big deal. It was his mantra, his get-out-of-jail-free card. It was the rule of silence. It taught Tessa and me, in no uncertain terms, that Marla's emotional comfort was more important than our pain, our memories, or our truth. His avoidance was a form of violence. I could not fight them with emotion. They were fluent in a language I did not speak, one of outbursts and strategic tears and performative victimhood. So, I turned to the only language that made sense. I turned to data. I was 14 when I started. It was not a diary. It was a spreadsheet, hidden on a password-protected thumb drive. I logged everything. I transcribed grocery receipts, creating pivot tables that showed the precise dollar amount disparity between Tessa's brand-name organic snacks and my generic essentials. I logged Marla's social calendar from the family's shared digital organizer, cross-referencing it with the dates of my father's last-minute client dinners. The correlation was nearly 100%. I started tracking her vocabulary, the frequency of phrases like, "It's for the family," or "We simply must." I learned to filter our household's Wi-Fi traffic, capturing the metadata of her browsing history. Data did not lie. Data did not get emotional. Data did not tell me to calm down or not make a big deal. It simply presented the facts. It was my map to justice, my proof of a reality they all denied. The burn on my arm, the one throbbing under the cold water, was not the first time she had put her hands on me. The first time was years ago. I must have been 12. I was assisting Marla in baking 3 dozen cookies for a school fundraiser she was chairing. I was clumsy, still growing into my limbs. I was carrying a small packet of active dry yeast, and I tripped over the leg of the kitchen island. The packet flew from my hand, bursting on the tile and sending a fine, beige, dusty powder across her pristine, dark wood floor. I froze. "I'm sorry. I'll clean." Before I could finish, she shoved me. It was not a nudge. It was a hard, two-handed push to my chest. "You are so clumsy. You have ruined it." I stumbled backward, my head cracking hard against the stainless steel door of the refrigerator. The handle, a solid bar of metal, dug sharply into my spine. My eyes watered from the impact. I whispered, "I'm sorry," and she just yelled, "Clean it up, now, and do not use the good towels." I cleaned it up, my head throbbing, my back aching. I learned, in that moment, that my apologies were worthless. My pain was an inconvenience. That night, sitting in my room, I promised myself, staring at the empty, sterile lines of my spreadsheet, that I would not be a victim in my own home. I would not be erased. I would just be patient. I would collect. I would document. And I would wait. It is no surprise I ended up at Kestrel Impact Labs. My job, boiled down to its essence, is to find the truth hidden in complex, chaotic systems. I trace dark money for nonprofits. I expose shell companies for humanitarian groups. I build cases from a million scattered, innocuous data points, revealing the patterns of deceit that adults try to hide. My entire career is just a larger, more complex version of Marla's household accounting. Tessa, on the other hand, learned a different lesson. She is not blind. I have seen her watch us. I have seen the flicker of unease in her eyes when Marla switches her tone from honey to venom in a split second. She has seen the disparity in gifts, heard the difference in our Father's voice. She knows, in the vague, uncomfortable way a person does when their entire world, their comfort, their car, their allowance, their mother's love, depends on not knowing. She is afraid of her mother. She is terrified of losing her place in the spotlight. Her silence is the price of admission to her own life. So no, this seed of rebellion, this plan forming in my mind as I turned off the tap and dried my arm, it did not just sprout today. It has been growing in the dark for more than a decade. It has been watered by every empty chair at every awards ceremony. It has been fertilized by every branded fleece, every dismissive, "don't make a big deal." My skill at tracking the truth, at building an unassailable case from 1,000 tiny, overlooked facts, did not come from my education. It came from my survival. And as I stood there, the skin on my arm already blistering, listening to the resumed, false cheer of the kitchen behind me, I knew the long, patient season of gathering was over. The harvest was finally ready. This trip was different before it even began. The cracks were not just showing, they were splintering, and I had been tracking their progress for weeks from the safety of my New York apartment. It started, as it always does, with Marla's voice on the phone, a sound like silk being stretched too tight over a steel frame. "Rowan, darling, just calling to confirm your train," she'd said 3 weeks ago. Her voice was light, airy, the one she used for public consumption. "And darling, a small request. I'm trying to curate a warm harvest aesthetic for my Thanksgiving post. The dress code is a buttery beige, just something soft, you know? It will look so cohesive." It was not a request. It was an invoice for my attendance. I was a prop, and she was providing my costume notes. I agreed in the same monotone I used for ordering coffee. a blandness that I knew infuriated her. An hour later, my father's contribution arrived. An email, not a call. Subject: Thanksgiving Day. Timeline: Ellison. It was formatted with bullet points. 2:00 p.m. Guest arrival window. 3:15 p.m. Marla's welcome toast. 4:30 p.m. Carving and plating. 5:00 p.m. Seated dinner. He had even included a subpoint for designated photo opportunities post-toast. There was no, "I'm looking forward to seeing you," no "travel safe." It was a production schedule for an office retreat. It was my father's love language. Structured. Sterile avoidance. He managed his family like a portfolio, desperate to mitigate any emotional risk. This email was his annual firewall. This combination, Marla's aesthetic dictatorship and Graham's emotional sterility, always put me on edge. It prompted a ritual I had developed years ago. A full, deep-dive data audit of my family's public-facing life. It was my way of checking the perimeter, of knowing what traps were set before I walked into them. I started with Marla's social media. Her profiles were a fortress of curated perfection, all muted tones and sponsored content for artisanal jams. But this time, something new was pinned to the top of her feed, a post announcing the launch of her very own charitable foundation, the Warm Hearth Initiative. The post was a photo of her and Graham, smiling, holding hands in front of a professionally lit fireplace. The caption was a masterpiece of saccharine vagueness. In this season of gratitude, Graham and I are so blessed to launch the Warm Hearth Initiative, a fund dedicated to bringing the warmth of a good meal and a safe home to families in our community. We believe every hearth should be a warm one. My pulse didn't quicken. It grew cold. Marla was many things. Charitable was not one of them. Giving back, in her world, was a transaction, an exchange for social capital. My fingers went to work. This was my territory. I was not a daughter. I was an analyst. I searched for the Warm Hearth Initiative in the IRS database of tax-exempt organizations. It was real, or at least, the paperwork was. It had been registered 6 months prior as a 501c3, so she had filed the forms. Next, I followed the Donate Now link from her profile. It led to a slick, minimalist website. I donated $10. I watched the transaction. The email receipt did not come from Warm Hearth. The charge on my card was from a different entity entirely. Voss Creative Partners, LLC. Voss, Marla's maiden name. I ran Voss Creative Partners through the state business database. It was a domestic LLC, filed in Delaware. Of course, the registered agent was a generic clearinghouse, but its principal address, listed on its bare-bones website, a portfolio of stock photos and buzzwords like synergy and brand actualization, was a P.O. box in the next town over from Stonebridge. It was a ghost, a shell company set up to receive money. The pieces were clicking into place. Money went into the Warm Hearth Initiative, a nonprofit, tax-deductible entity. It was then paid out as a consulting or branding fee to Voss Creative Partners, a private, for-profit company controlled by Marla. She was washing her friends' tax-deductible donations and pocketing them. A call from Tessa a week later added the next data point. She was breathless, giddy. "Rowan, you are not going to believe it. Mom is getting me a car for getting, good grades this semester." "A car? Wow. Tess, what kind?" "It is a little used. A certified pre-owned, she called it. But it is so cute. A little blue hybrid. She said it was an early Christmas present." She sent me a picture of her posing next to it, the Voss family smile plastered on her face. I zoomed in. The dealer's temporary plate was still in the window, but on the lower left of the windshield, there was a parking permit sticker, a residential one. I could just make out the name on the registration line. Property of TWHI. My blood ran cold. TWI, the Warm Hearth Initiative. I have a professional-grade subscription to several public records databases. It took me less than 30 seconds. I ran the vehicle identification number from a different photo Tessa had posted, one where she showed off the dashboard, The car was not an early Christmas present from Marla. It was registered to the Warm Hearth Initiative. It was a foundation asset. Marla was using tax-exempt donation money to buy her daughter a car, likely writing it off as an administrative vehicle. I went back to Marla's social media, this time with a new, sharper focus. I scrolled back, looking for other new, large purchases. There, 3 weeks ago, a post of the dining room, set for a dinner party. Just thrilled to bits with this antique Limoges china set I won at the community giving table auction, all for a good cause, and it matches my runners perfectly. I found the auction's website. The giving table was a legitimate local charity, and there, on their sponsors page, was the Warm Hearth Initiative. Listed as a gold-level sponsor, the donation for that level was $5,000. I dug into the auction catalog. Lot 34, Antique Limoges China Set. Estimated value, $4,000. Marla had donated $5,000 of other people's money to the auction, received a $5,000 tax receipt for her foundation, and then used that sponsorship to win the china, likely paying only a fraction of its value, or perhaps nothing at all, as part of her sponsor package. The money was a carousel. It went around and around, and every time it passed go, Marla collected a prize. This was all damning, but it was still external. It was Marla being Marla, a grifter in Kashmir. The final piece of the puzzle was the one that landed in my own inbox, the one that made it personal. It was an automated alert from the bank that manages the trust my mother left me. It was not a huge sum, just a small, carefully invested fund she had set up for my education and future, a nest egg that I guarded fiercely. I never touched it, preferring to let it grow, a last, quiet piece of her in the world. The subject line was innocuous. Alert. New third-party fee schedule approved. I logged in immediately. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. A new recurring quarterly asset management fee had been authorized. The first withdrawal, for $500, had been processed that morning. This had never happened before. The trust was managed by the bank itself, not an external advisor. I clicked on the details of the new fee. The fee was not being paid to the bank. It was being paid to Voss Financial Services, Inc. A different name, but the same network. I searched the name, registered at the same P.O. box as Voss Creative Partners. I felt the air leave my lungs. My father was the co-trustee, a legal necessity, as I was a minor when my mother died. He had signing power, Marla, who had wormed her way into every aspect of his digital life, who had all his passwords, who he'd given access to his online banking to help with the household bills, must have found it. She must have logged in as him, signed a new advisory agreement, and designated her own shell company as a financial manager for my inheritance. She was stealing from me. She was stealing my mother's money. This was no longer about emotional neglect. This was not about beige sweaters or missed science fairs. This was felony-level fraud. This was theft. My training took over. I suppressed the rage, the grief, the visceral desire to smash something. Instead, I moved. My first call was not to the bank. Not yet. I called a colleague, a man named Ben at the nonprofit Transparency Project, an organization Kestrel Labs frequently partners with for pro bono data analysis. Ben, I said, my voice perfectly level. I have a hypothetical for you. I'm looking at a 501c3 that appears to be acting as a pass-through for a private LLC. It's accepting public donations and paying them out to a shell company owned by the founder. Can you run the plumbing for me? I need to know how dirty it is. Hypothetical, sure, he said. I could hear him already typing. Send me the EIN. While Ben worked, I began my own archival. I pulled out my encrypted external hard drive, the one I kept in a fireproof safe. I began backing up everything. The spreadsheets I had kept as a teenager, the complete mirrored archive of Graham's email account, which I had set up over a decade ago, every financial statement, every shared calendar, every digital property deed. I cataloged years of Marla's social media posts, saving the source images, metadata intact, I downloaded every text message. I watched the file transfer progress bar, a slow-moving green line. This was my life's work. This was the data. A cold, clear thought settled over me. It was a line I had written in my journal years ago. If they treat me like air, then I will be the sound. Ben called back 2 hours later. His voice was grim. Rowan, this warm hearth thing is not just sloppy, it is brazen. It filed for status, but it has never filed a Form 990. The donation portal is a direct, unfiltered pipe to that LLC. There is no board of directors listed, no public minutes. This is not just unethical, it is textbook fraud. I thanked him and hung up. I opened my laptop. I did not go to the bank's website. I did not call my father. I opened the Amtrak website and booked a one-way ticket to Stonebridge for the day before Thanksgiving. I was not coming home for a meal. I was not coming home to make a big deal. I was coming home to close a case. I was coming home to finish it. The performance began the moment the oven timer was set. Marla, my stepmother, needed her shot. Not just any shot, but the one she had been storyboarding for a week. The one she called her Buttery Bubbles photo. She had a tripod set up on the kitchen island, her own phone gleaming in its clamp, while Tessa circled with hers, capturing behind-the-scenes footage. The kitchen was a stage, and the lighting was wrong. It is all too harsh, Marla complained, tugging at the blind over the sink. I need that soft, afternoon glow. Graham, the steam from the potatoes is fogging the lens. My father grunted, moving the pot. Rowan, she said, turning her attention to me. I was standing by the counter, deliberately out of frame, my hands occupied with a bowl of green beans. You are in the shadow. You are ruining the composition. I need you in the shot, to make it look full. I am busy, Marla. Do not be difficult. It is not hard. Just stand by the oven. Stand there. Look appreciative. Look like you are learning something. The audacity of it, to be told to perform appreciation for my own abuser. I stayed where I was. Rowan, now, her voice dropped from its airy social media lilt to the flat, sharp blade I knew so well. This was the escalation. My refusal to wear her ridiculous beige lace apron had been strike one. My refusal to be her set dressing was strike two. She moved across the kitchen in 3 quick strides. I am trying to capture one perfect moment, she hissed, her smile rigid for Tessa's nearby camera. And you are deliberately sabotaging me. Her hand clamped around my upper arm. She yanked. It was not a gentle pull. It was a violent correction, meant to pivot me, to force me into the spot she had designated. You are ruining, she started to say. The force of her pull, combined with my own resistance, threw me off balance. I stumbled backward. My body collided with the oven. Time did not just slow down, it fractured. My shoulder and the back of my arm made contact with the razor-thin, searing hot edge of the main oven door, which my father had left cracked open an inch to manage the heat. It was not a blunt impact, it was a brand. A white-hot electric line of pain shot through me. The fabric of my sweater sizzled. I gasped, a sharp, choked sound. In the exact same microsecond, the oven timer, its countdown complete, unleashed a piercing digital shriek. The kitchen froze. My father, Graham, reacted instantly, not to my gasp, not to the thud of my body hitting his prized appliance. He reacted to the timer. He looked up, his eyes immediately finding the glowing red numbers on the display. He did not look at me. He did not look at Marla. His voice was utterly devoid of emotion. It was flat, informative, detached. He said it with the same casual indifference he might use to announce that the mail had arrived. It was a comment on the status of poultry. Nothing more. I turned my head. Tessa was standing by the island, her own phone still held high. Her hand was frozen. Her face was a mask of pale, stunned silence. Her thumb, I realized, must have been pressing the shutter button for a still photo at the exact moment of the impact. Her phone, always set to live photo mode to capture the moments between the moments, had recorded it all. The 1.5 seconds before the shove, the sound of Marla's voice, the impact, my gasp, and the 1.5 seconds after, capturing my father's voice, clear as a bell, delivering his line. My own mind was running a diagnostic, a sensory log of the event. Data point 1. The smell of burning wool, sharp and chemical, as my sweater scorched. Data point 2. The cloying smell of browning butter and sage. Data point 3. The high-pitched, insistent shriek of the oven timer. Data point 4. The low, steady vibration of the exhaust fan overhead. Data point 5. The sound of my father's voice. Turkey's burning, the words hung in the air. A perfect, damning summary of my entire life in this house. Data point 6. The pain. It was no longer a sharp line. It was a radiating, pulsating core of fire, spreading deep into my shoulder. The tableau held for a second longer, a perfect, monstrous snapshot of our family. Marla recovered first. She did not apologize. She did not look at my arm. She let go of me, her hand flying to her hair as if to fix an errant strand. She smoothed the front of her cashmere sweater. She walked to the window, the one she had complained about, and gave the cord a sharp, aggressive tug, the plastic blinds clattering against the pane. "This light is simply impossible," she announced to the room, her voice bright and brittle again. "Completely unworkable. We will have to do the basting shot after the guests arrive. Tessa, darling, come help me with the centerpiece." She had reset the scene. The incident was over. It had not happened. I did not speak. I did not cry. I did not give her the satisfaction of a visible reaction. I turned, my movements stiff, and walked out of the kitchen. I slid open the heavy glass door to the back porch and stepped out into the biting November air. The cold was a shock, a welcome, grounding pain. I went to the patio storage bench and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, beneath mildewed towels and a deflated basketball, was the family first aid kit. I dug past rolls of gauze and cartoon-themed bandages until I found it. A rectangular, blue gel cold pack. I squeezed it hard, felt the inner disc pop, and the chemical cold flooded the packet. I sat down on the damp cushion of the bench. I pulled up the sleeve of my ruined sweater. The skin was hideous, a long, angry red welt, already blistering in the center, the surrounding flesh puckering. This was not a minor burn. I pressed the cold pack to it. The combination of searing heat and chemical cold was agonizing, and I bit down hard on my lip, my eyes watering. I stayed there, hidden, letting the cold numb the fire. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wireless earbud. It was still connected. I opened my phone and went straight to the secure recording app. I hit stop. The file saved. I scrolled back 2 minutes and pressed play, holding the phone close to my ear. The audio was perfect, better than I could have hoped. The sensitive microphone had caught everything. Marla's voice, ruining the composition, the scuffle of feet, the distinct dull thud of my body hitting the oven, my own sharp, choked gasp, the shriek of the timer, and then, overlaid with perfect, damning clarity, Graham's voice. "Turkey's burning." I saved the file. I labeled it, "Oven, Thanksgiving." I looked at my arm. The cold pack was already losing its edge. The flesh around the burn was beginning to darken, the deep, ugly purple of a traumatic bruise setting in beneath the raw skin. This was the pivot, the data point that changed the entire equation. Sitting on that cold, damp porch, listening to the muffled sounds of performative laughter from the kitchen, I felt a switch flip. The part of me that had walked into this house as Rowan Ellison, the daughter, the one who still carried a microscopic, foolish ember of hope for connection, for recognition, she was gone. The burn had cauterized that final, stupid wound. The person left in her place was someone else entirely. It was the investigator. It was the analyst from Kestrel Impact Labs. This was no longer my home. It was a case study. My father and stepmother were no longer family. They were subjects of an investigation. I was not here for Thanksgiving. I was here to document, to expose, and to terminate a long-term pattern of abuse and fraud. I went back inside, avoiding the kitchen. I walked up the carpeted stairs to my old bedroom, the guest room, the room that still had my high school debate trophies tucked on a bookshelf, gathering dust. I took my bag from the floor. I pulled out my portable power bank, a heavy black brick I carry for work, and plugged my phone into it. I could not risk running out of battery. I opened my phone again. I launched my encrypted cloud storage app, the one linked to my Kestrel account. I began the upload. Oven. Thanksgiving, MP3. I watched the progress bar. I then uploaded the screenshot of the bank transfer from my mother's trust, the VIN registration for Tessa's car, the PDF of the Warm Hearth Initiative's fraudulent sponsorship package. I was creating an off-site, unassailable dossier. My phone vibrated. A text notification lit up the screen. It was from Tessa. "Are you okay?" I stared at the words. As I watched, the message bubble shimmered and vanished. A new line appeared. Tessa deleted a message. I felt a bitter, cold laugh threaten to rise in my throat. She was so terrified of Marla finding a record of her disloyalty that she could not even leave a simple question. Her fear was so ingrained. It was a reflex. I waited. The screen was dark. A full minute passed. The phone vibrated again. The same message. "Are you okay?" She had sent it again. A tiny, pathetic spark of courage. A desperate signal. My response had to be perfect. Not emotional, not angry. I could not scare her. I needed her. I needed her live photo. I typed back, my fingers steady. "Fine." I paused, considering. Then I added the instruction. "Keep things exactly as they are. Do not delete anything. Just act normal." I hit send. I was not just talking about the text. I was telling her to protect the evidence. I was telling her to hold the line. I put the phone in my pocket. I adjusted the cold pack on my arm. The pain now a dull, manageable throb. I took a deep, steadying breath. It was time to return to the scene. The guests would be arriving soon. I walked out of the bathroom. The cold pack pressed tight to my arm. The pain was no longer a fire. It was a metronome. A cold, steady beat against which I would build my case. My old bedroom was no longer a refuge. It was an operations center. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and began the work. First, the audio file. Oven. Thanksgiving, MP3. I exported it, but an audio file alone is just my word against theirs. It needed corroboration. It needed a digital footprint. Marla, in her obsession with image and convenience, had made this house smart. It was her favorite party trick, telling the lights to dim, telling the speakers to play her curated playlists. It was also her greatest vulnerability. I still had administrative access to the home Wi-Fi network. I was, after all, the useful shadow who had set it up for them, the one who reset the passwords they always forgot. I logged in. I went straight to the oven. It was a top-of-the-line model that synced to her phone. I pulled its internal device log. The data was beautifully precise. 5:07 p.m. Oven preheat cycle completed. 5:09 p.m. Timer elapsed. 5:09 p.m. Oven door sensor registered open. 5:10 p.m. Oven status changed to keep warm. The data was close, but I needed to sync it with the audio. I pulled the logs from the smart speaker in the kitchen. It was always listening, waiting for a wake word. It logged all ambient, high-decibel acoustic events. 5:09:12 p.m. Acoustic event. Peak decibel, 85. Classification. Alarm, digital. It had logged the timer. 5:09:13 p.m. Acoustic event, peak decibel, 70. Classification, speech, my gasp. 5:10:04 p.m. Acoustic event, peak decibel, 68. Classification, speech, turkeys burning. I cross-referenced the Ring doorbell camera. No one had entered or left, confirming the subjects. I pulled the log from the smart refrigerator, the one Marla used for her digital grocery lists. Its sensors had logged the kitchen temperature, the humidity, the exact moment its own internal compressor kicked on. I synthesized the data streams into a single, unified timeline, marrying my audio file to the house's own digital memory. 5:08, 20 seconds, Marla's voice. Ruining the composition. 5:09, 11 seconds. The sound of the shove, the impact. 5:09, 12 seconds. The oven alarm. 5:09, 13 seconds. My gasp. 5:10, 4 seconds. Graham's voice. Turkey's burning. 5:11, 18 seconds. Marla's voice. This light is simply impossible. The house itself was my witness. My phone buzzed. A secure message from Ben at the Nonprofit Transparency Project. He had received my final data packet from the trust. His message was brief. This is open and shut. Rowan, the final report is uploaded to your secure server. The foundation, the LLC, and the financial advisory firm are all registered to the same P&O box. It's a closed loop. She's been transferring donation money in blocks of just under $10,000 to avoid SAR flags. It is textbook. Go get her. I downloaded the encrypted package. It was the centerpiece. The flowchart he created was a work of art, a map of her greed. I saw the names of donors, neighbors, many of whom were on their way here tonight. I saw the money flow from the Warm Hearth Initiative directly to Voss Creative Partners. And from there, the spiderweb. A payment to the Giving Table auction for the donated china. A check to the luxury car dealership for Tessa's gift, and monthly service fees paid directly to Marla's personal credit card. Now, my own file, my mother's trust. I opened the digital contract Marla had signed using my father's credentials, the family image and brand management service she had invented. I checked the date on the contract. It was the exact same day she had filed the incorporation papers for Voss Creative Partners. She had built the entire fraudulent enterprise at once, and she had used my inheritance as her seed money. I had to move before she did. I opened a new, secure email client. I addressed it to the compliance department head at the bank managing my mother's trust, a woman I had corresponded with once before. I CC'd the bank's general counsel. Subject: urgent. Formal dispute of fraudulent activity and unauthorized management fees. Trust of my mother's name. To whom it may concern. I am the beneficiary of the above-referenced trust. I am writing to formally dispute a series of new recurring asset management fees being paid to a third-party entity, Voss Financial Services, Inc. This entity was authorized without my knowledge or consent. I have attached documentation, including the original service contract, which I believe to be fraudulent. The managing entity is a shell corporation with direct personal links to the co-trustee's spouse, Marla Voss, and is part of a larger, active fraudulent financial network. Effective immediately, I am requesting a total and immediate freeze on all outflows, transfers, and management fees from this trust. I am also formally requesting a full investigation into how this authorization occurred. All further attempts to withdraw funds should be considered fraudulent and criminal. I have attached the initial evidence. I await your immediate confirmation. Sincerely, Rowan Ellison. I attached the PDF of the Voss financial contract and the registration of the shell company. I hit send. The first wall was built. She was cut off. Now for the audience. This could not happen in a vacuum. Marla's power came from her public image, her curated reputation among her friends and neighbors. She needed to be held accountable by the very people she was performing for and stealing from. I picked up my phone. I opened a group text message. I added the names I had seen on Ben's donor list. The Parkers, who lived 3 doors down. The Millers, a few of my father's siblings. My aunts and uncles who were scheduled to arrive later. The ones who always whispered that Marla was a bit much, but never had the courage to say it to her face. I typed the message, my tone light, breezy. Hi everyone, it's Rowan. So looking forward to seeing you all tonight. Marla has made a truly spectacular dessert, and we wanted to do an early tasting before things get too crazy. Any chance you could pop over a little earlier than planned? Say around 6:30? We're opening the good wine. Can't wait to catch up. It was perfect. It used her own vanity as bait. 6:30, That gave me less than an hour. My goal was simple: to have the maximum number of witnesses present, specifically the witnesses whose donations were currently furnishing the house. I needed one more piece. I went downstairs. The house was now humming with false cheer. Marla was directing my father on where to place the carved turkey, while Tessa nervously polished wine glasses, her eyes darting to me and then quickly away. "Hey, Tess," I said quietly, coming up beside her. She flinched, nearly dropping a glass. "You scared me." "Sorry, I just wanted to say, the pictures you were taking earlier were amazing. You're so good at capturing the vibe of the day." She blushed, a small, genuine smile. "You think? Mom said I was in the way." "No, they're perfect. Listen, can you do me a favor?" I kept my voice low, conspiratorial. "Just keep doing it, all night. Get the behind-the-scenes stuff, the guests arriving, the way the light hits the table, the candid moments. You're so good at it. It's for Mom's story. Just capture everything." She nodded, her sense of purpose restored. "Okay, yeah, I can do that." She did not know it, but she was now my primary documentarian. Every photo she snapped, every live photo that captured the seconds before and after, would be another time-stamped, geolocated piece of evidence. She was corroborating my timeline. Finally, the delivery system. I went back upstairs and grabbed the last piece of hardware from my work bag. A Pico projector. It was no bigger than my phone. A tiny, powerful tool I used for client presentations. I loaded a thumb drive with the essential files. The audio clip, now embedded in the timeline graphic, Ben's financial flowchart, the car registration, the screenshot of my mother's trust statement next to the Voss financial contract. I went to the dining room. It was empty, perfectly set, candles unlit. Marla was back in the kitchen, berating Graham. I crawled under the heavy dining table. The beige tablecloth, part of her buttery theme, hung almost to the floor. Using 2 heavy-duty zip ties from my bag, I secured the projector to the central table support, aiming the lens at the large, blank, cream-colored wall at the head of the room. It was the perfect screen. I ran the thin power cord along the table leg, tucking it under the edge of the antique rug, and plugged it into the wall socket. I inserted the thumb drive. I clicked the remote in my hand once. The projector whirred to life. I checked the focus. It was sharp. I clicked it off. I slid out from under the table, straightened the cloth. It was completely invisible. I slipped the small black remote into the pocket of my jeans. I went to the powder room off the hall and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark. The burn on my arm throbbed. A dull, purple reminder. I felt a cold, shaking surge of adrenaline. I was about to detonate a nuclear device in the middle of a Thanksgiving dinner. I braced my hands on the cold marble sink. I took a deep breath. This is not for pleasure. This is not for revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy, emotional indulgence. This is a correction. This is an audit. My entire life, they have operated in the shadows. They have used emotion and noise and social convention as a shield. They have relied on my father's avoidance and Tessa's fear and my silence. I am not here to scream. I am not here to cry. I am here to turn on the lights. I held myself to a single, guiding principle. You do not humiliate someone for the thrill of it. You illuminate the facts so they can no longer hide. This is not an execution. It is an exposure. I am here to present the data. The data will do the rest. I opened my eyes. The girl in the mirror looked cold, but she looked ready. From the foyer, I heard the sound of the doorbell. I checked my watch. 6:30, right on time. The first of the witnesses had arrived. The guests arrived, just as I knew they would. My early dessert tasting text had worked perfectly. By 6:45, the living room was full. The Parkers, whose donation to Warm Hearth had been substantial, my Uncle David, my father's brother, who looked perpetually confused by Marla's lifestyle, and several of Marla's committee friends, the ones whose names I had cross-referenced on the donor list. They were all here, sipping my father's expensive wine, admiring the antique Limoges china. Marla was in her element. She glided through the room, a vision in buttery beige, her voice a symphony of false modesty and curated warmth. She was an actor on her opening night, and her audience was captive. "Everyone! Everyone! If I could have your attention," she called out, tapping a fork against her wineglass. The room quieted. She stood at the head of the dining table, her hand resting proprietorially on the back of Graham's chair. "Before we sit down to this wonderful meal, I just want to say a few words." She paused, her eyes glistening with practiced emotion. "Thanksgiving is about gratitude, yes, but more than that, it is about connection. It is about the unbreakable bonds of family, and looking around this room, at our friends, our neighbors. You are all our family. Graham and I are just so blessed." She raised her glass. "To family, the ones we are born with, and the ones we choose." "To family," the room echoed. Glasses clinked. My father beamed at her, his face flushed with wine and relief that the performance was going well. As the murmur subsided and people began to move toward their seats, I smiled warmly at Marla. "That was beautiful, Marla." She looked at me, surprised by the compliment, her eyes narrowing slightly, searching for the catch. "I was just thinking," I continued, my voice clear and helpful. "Since we are all here, this would be the perfect time to try out the new smart speaker system. I could put on some light holiday music, just to set the mood. It will only take 2 minutes to test the audio." Marla's face relaxed. Music was part of her approved aesthetic. "Oh, what a lovely idea. Rowan, yes, go right ahead. The main speaker is the one on the console." "Perfect." I pulled out my phone. I did not walk to the speaker. I did not need to. I tapped the icon for the home audio system. I selected the kitchen speaker, the one that had logged the event. Then I selected broadcast to all rooms. "Testing audio levels," I announced clearly. "Starting in 3, 2, 1. I hit play. It was not music. The house was suddenly filled with a crystal-clear, high-fidelity recording. First, Marla's voice, sharp and venomous, echoing from the living room ceiling, from the dining room console, from the hallway speaker. Ruining the composition, a scuffle, the distinct, sickening thud of my body hitting the oven, my own sharp, choked gasp, amplified, filling the space, the piercing, multi-room shriek of the oven timer. And then, the climax, delivered in my father's flat, in different baritone, echoing from every corner. "Turkey's burning." The silence that followed was absolute. It was not just quiet. It was a vacuum, a wine glass, halfway to someone's lips. Stopped. Conversations died mid-word. Every single person in that room was frozen. Their heads turned toward the speakers, then toward Marla, then toward Graham, and finally, toward me. Marla's face was a horrifying rictus of a smile. The color had drained from it, leaving a pale, waxy mask. "Well," she laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Goodness, a little technical glitch, it seems. Rowan, darling, I think you have the wrong file." I looked at my phone, my face a perfect study of mild confusion. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. That must have been a stray voice memo. How embarrassing. Let me just turn that off." I tapped my screen. The silence rushed back in, heavy and thick with unasked questions. I put my phone in my pocket. "So sorry about that, everyone." I tried to turn back to my conversation, as if nothing had happened, but the social contract was broken. The performance was shattered. The whispering started almost immediately. I could see Mrs. Parker lean into her husband, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that? That was her voice. She hit her." Uncle David was just staring at my father, his mouth slightly open. And then, as I had anticipated, a few people looked at me, really looked at me. My long-sleeved sweater, the one I had changed into, was dark, but the cuff had ridden up slightly as I gestured with my phone. Mrs. Miller, who was sitting closest to me, gasped. It was quiet, but in that room, It was a gunshot. Her eyes were fixed on my arm, on the angry purple-black bruise and the weeping, blistered line of the burn, which I had deliberately left exposed for just that second. I pulled my sleeve down quickly, as if in shame, but the image was planted. They had the audio, and now they had the visual. Graham, my father, was not looking at Marla. He was not looking at the guests. For the first time all night, perhaps for the first time in a decade, he was looking directly at me. His face was not angry. It was not sympathetic. It was something far worse. It was confused. He looked like a man who had just been told the rules of a game he had been playing his whole life had suddenly changed. His brow was furrowed, his eyes processing the data, the sound, the burn, the silence. Tessa was as white as the antique china. She was clutching her water glass, her knuckles bloodless. Her whole body was vibrating, a low-frequency tremble I could see from across the room. Her eyes met mine, wide and terrified, pleading. She looked like she was about to either vomit or scream. She opened her mouth, a small "I," escaping, but then clamped it shut, her loyalty and her terror at war. The moment stretched, threatening to break the entire evening apart. The guests stood, awkward, trapped between the kitchen and the dining room, unsure of the protocol for a scene they had never witnessed. Marla tried to regain control. "Please, everyone, let's sit. Let's sit. Graham, darling, the wine." But the crack was too deep. My Uncle David, a simple man who did not understand social subtleties, but did understand right and wrong, cleared his throat. He was still looking at my father. "Graham, what the hell was that?" "It was a glitch, David," Marla snapped, her voice too high. "Did not sound like a glitch to me," he muttered. And then, the second pivot, the one I had been waiting for, my Aunt Clara, David's wife, a woman who always sent a $20 check for every one of Marla's causes, turned to Marla, her face a mask of polite confusion. "Marla, dear," she said, "speaking of all this family giving, David and I were so impressed by your new charity, the Warm Hearth Initiative. It sounds just wonderful." It was a life raft, and Marla grabbed it with both hands. This was her territory. She could perform this. The color rushed back to her face. "Oh, Clara, thank you for saying so," she gushed, her stage smile back in place. "It is my true passion project, just a little something we started to give back. You know, we have been so blessed." "We were just so happy to contribute," Clara continued, walking right into the trap. "And we saw the Parkers did too. It is so wonderful to see where the money is going." "Exactly," Marla beamed. "It is all about transparency and—" "In fact," Mrs. Parker chimed in, "I was just admiring this stunning china. Is this the set from the Giving Table auction? You are so lucky you won it." "Oh, this old thing?" Marla touched the plate, a gesture of false humility. "I suppose I was lucky, yes, but the real winner was the community." She was on a roll. She was rebuilding the narrative. She clapped her hands. "Now, please, sit, sit. The turkey is getting cold. And we have the most divine pumpkin cheesecake for dessert. I will just tell the cater waiter to bring it out." She began to push past the guests, moving toward the kitchen, desperate to change the subject, to fill their mouths with sugar, to end the conversation. "Actually, Marla." I stepped forward. My voice was not loud, but it cut through her nervous chatter. She stopped, her back to me. "Before dessert," I said, my tone light, "I have a few words I would like to say. Too, following up on your lovely toast." She turned slowly, her eyes cold. "Rowan, I do not think now is the—" "It will only take a moment," I said, smiling at the guests. "In fact, it is specifically for all of you, for Aunt Clara, and the Parkers, and everyone who has been so generous. I just have a few little images to show, a way of saying thank you, a little thank you for all the donors." I looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them. "I hope you do not mind. I am a data analyst, You know, it is what I do. I love to show the impact. Before Marla could form a coherent objection, I spoke to the room again. Graham, Dad, could you get the lights? It is a little hard to see. My father, still in a state of confusion, his programming telling him to avoid conflict and follow instructions, moved to the wall and hit the dimmer switch. The dining room lights faded to a low, intimate glow. And in the sudden, expectant darkness, I slipped my hand into my pocket and pressed the single button on the small, black remote. From its hiding place under the table, the Pico projector whirred to life. A bright, sharp rectangle of light hit the blank wall at the head of the room, right above Marla's empty chair. The first slide appeared. It was the beautiful, professionally designed logo for the Warm Hearth Initiative. The logo for the Warm Hearth Initiative glowed on the wall. It was warm, inviting, a professional design of a stylized fireplace. Marla, frozen at the head of the table, stared at it, her mind clearly racing, trying to understand what this was. As I said, I began, my voice calm, conversational, the voice I used for client briefings. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the generous donors who have supported Marla's wonderful passion project. I clicked the remote in my pocket. The slide changed. The logo remained, but beside it, a list of names and dates appeared. Robert and Diane Parker. Donation, $5,000. Date, October 12th. Clara and David Ellison. Donation, $500. Date, September 30th. The Miller family. Donation, $1,000. Date, October 3rd. The names continued. I saw Mrs. Parker's hand fly to her mouth. I saw my Aunt Clara lean forward, squinting, her polite confusion hardening into something else. The guests were looking at their own names, then at Marla. The room was silent. Your generosity, I continued, has made so much possible. I clicked again. Slide 2 appeared. It was the flowchart Ben had prepared. It was simple, brutal, and easy to understand. A large box labeled the Warm Hearth Initiative, 501c3, sat at the top. An arrow pointed down to a box beneath it. Voss Creative Partners, LLC, beside that arrow, in red, were the words, Consulting and Branding Fees. From the Voss Creative Partners box, several other arrows snaked out. One pointed to a box labeled Giving Table Charity Auction. Another pointed to Stonebridge Luxury Auto. A third pointed to a generic box labeled Personal Credit Accounts. As a data analyst, I said, I find it helpful to visualize the impact of a donation, to see the journey the money takes. Rowan, Marla said, her voice a low, dangerous tremor. This is wildly inappropriate. Turn this off. This is private foundation business. Is it? I asked, my voice still light. Because it starts with public donations. Let's follow the journey. The money enters the Warm Hearth, a tax-deductible nonprofit. From there, it is moved, almost in its entirety, to a private, for-profit company, Voss Creative Partners, an entity, by the way, that shares a P&O box with the foundation and has one registered officer, you, Marla. The gasps were audible this time. Now, let's look at the impact, I said. I clicked the remote. Slide 3. It was a high-resolution photograph of the Giving Table auction catalog. Lot 34. Antique Limoges China set. Estimated value, $4,000. Beside it, I had placed a screenshot of the auction's final procurement invoice. Item, Lot 34. Buyer, Voss Creative Partners. Price, acquired via gold-level sponsorship package. And beside that, a receipt. Source, the Warm Hearth Initiative. Payment to Giving Table. Auction, $5,000. Mrs. Parker, Aunt Clara, here's your donation at work, I said gently. Your $5,000, plus others, was donated to the Giving Table auction by the Warm Hearth, which got a nice tax receipt. In exchange for that sponsorship, Voss Creative Partners, Marla's private company, was able to acquire this $4,000 China set, The very set we are about to eat off of. A beautiful example of community giving. Mrs. Parker looked down at the gold-rimmed plate in front of her as if it were covered in spiders. Marla, is this true? This is a complex, it's an accounting misunderstanding, Marla stammered, gripping the back of her chair. Is it? I asked. Let's look at another file. I clicked again. Slide 4. This slide was different. It was simpler and colder. It showed 2 documents, side by side. On the left, a bank statement from my mother's trust. A highlighted line item showed a new quarterly asset management fee for $500. On the right, a service contract. The header read, Voss Financial Services, Inc. The service listed was Family Image and Brand Management Services. The service code on the contract, 88B, was the exact same code listed on the bank statement's withdrawal line. Marla's business is not just limited to consulting, I explained, my voice losing its warmth, becoming flat and cold. She is also in financial management. This is a management fee, recently and mysteriously added to the trust my mother left me. The fee is being paid to another one of Marla's companies, which happens to be registered at the same P.O. box. She was using my inheritance as seed money. Graham! My Uncle David's voice was a low roar. He stood up, knocking his chair back. Graham, what the hell is this? That is Anne's money. You let her touch Anne's money? My father's face was ashen. He was staring at the screen, at the bank statement. His eyes locked on the authorization line. I did not. I would never. But you did, Dad. I clicked again. Slide 5. It was a screenshot of the digital authorization form submitted to the bank, and there, at the bottom, was the electronic signature, Graham P. Ellison. Graham, you signed it, Aunt Clara whispered, her face pale with horror. I did not, my father said, his voice shaking. He looked at Marla, his confusion finally, crystallizing into a terrible understanding. I never saw this. Marla, did you? You gave me your passwords. Darling, Marla said, her voice turning desperate, pleading. For the household bills, you told me to handle the accounts. You told me it was too complicated. Not that account, Graham whispered, sinking into his chair. Never that one. It seems, I said, that Voss Financial and Voss Creative are very busy. I clicked the remote one last time. The final slide, it showed a split screen. On the left, a receipt from the Stonebridge Luxury Auto Dealership for a certified pre-owned blue hybrid made out to the Warm Hearth Initiative. On the right, a screenshot of Marla's social media post from 3 weeks ago. It was the photo of Tessa, beaming, hugging the hood of the new car. Marla's caption was bright and bubbly beneath it. Our girl is growing up, so proud of her straight A's that we decided to treat her to an early Christmas present. She deserves the world. At the table, Tessa let out a sound. It was not a cry. It was a low, strangled sob. She was staring at the screen, at the receipt from the Warm Hearth Initiative. She looked at her mother, her face a mask of utter devastation, of betrayal so profound it was visceral. A gift. From the foundation? Tessa whispered, the tears now streaming down her face. You told me, you and Dad. You said I earned it. It was from them? The people who donated? She shoved her chair back, her whole body shaking. You used their money? You made me pose for a lie? The room was in chaos. Mrs. Parker was on her feet, her husband holding her arm. Marla, how could you? That money was for the community kitchen. Uncle David was pointing a shaking finger at my father. You let this happen, Graham. You just sat there and let her steal from your own daughter, from Anne. I did not know, Graham yelled, his voice cracking, a pathetic, weak sound. I did not know. This is an outrage, Mr. Parker said, his voice booming. This is fraud. Marla looked around, cornered, her eyes wild. She tried one last time. It is a misunderstanding. It's an accounting error. Rowan has twisted everything. She did this. She set me up. Did I? I asked, my voice cutting through the noise. I held up my phone, not connected to the projector, but to the speaker. The data is just the data, but just to be clear, I tapped my screen. My voice, recorded just that morning, filled the room. Ben, I said, I have a hypothetical for you. I'm looking at a 501c3 that appears to be acting as a pass-through for a private LLC. And then, Ben's voice, the voice of a neutral, third-party expert. Rowan, this warm hearth thing is not just sloppy, it is brazen. It is a direct, unfiltered pipe to that LLC. This is not just unethical, it is textbook fraud. I let the recording play. No one spoke. The expert opinion, the final nail, hung in the air. I love Thanksgiving, I said quietly, into the suffocating silence. The guests were all standing, a ring of judgment around our broken table. I love it because it reminds us to be grateful, to be thankful for what we have. I looked first at my father, then at Marla. But gratitude, I said, should not be paid for with other people's money, and it should never, ever, be used as an excuse to ignore the truth. The room was frozen. The guests were stunned. My family was in ruins. The presentation was over. I reached into my pocket and pressed the button on the remote. The projector light clicked off. The wall went blank, and the entire room was plunged back into darkness, leaving us all to sit there, choking on the bright, searing afterimage of the truth. The sudden darkness was a void, a shared coffin. I heard someone, Mrs. Parker, let out a small, terrified sound. Then came the clumsy fumbling at the wall, the click, click, click of the dimmer switch as my father, his hands shaking, tried to find the light. The room snapped back into horrifying, fluorescent brightness. We were all revealed, the guests, standing in a loose, awkward circle, frozen between judgment and a polite desire to flee. My Aunt Clara, her hand over her heart. My Uncle David, his face a furious, mottled red. Tessa, collapsed in her chair, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My father stood by the light switch, his hand still on it, as if he were afraid to let go, afraid the darkness might return. And Marla. She was at the head of the table, her hands flat on the antique china, her knuckles white. She was breathing fast, her chest heaving. She was cornered, and she came out fighting. Her eyes, wild and black, found mine. You, she spat. The word was pure venom. She rounded on my father. Graham, look at me. Do not you see what she has done? Her voice rose, becoming shrill, a performance for the horrified jury of neighbors. She did this. She planned this. This entire night. She staged this. She was grasping, her mind spinning a new narrative. The fraud. That is just, it is paperwork. It is a mistake. But this? She pointed at me, her finger trembling. This violence, this lie. She is trying to manipulate you. She burned herself. The accusation was so insane, so desperate, that the room held its breath. Yes, Marla shrieked, sensing the pause. She did. She knew the oven was hot. She has always been jealous, Graham, jealous of me, jealous of Tessa, jealous of what we have. She burned herself and recorded your voice to twist it, to make you look bad. She is trying to destroy our home. It was a brilliant, frantic gambit. It was her word against my audio. She burned herself? I asked. My voice was quiet, cutting through her hysteria. I looked across the table at the weeping figure of my sister. Tessa. Tessa flinched, her head snapping up. Her face was a wreck of mascara and terror. Tessa, you were filming, I said, my voice gentle, but loud enough for everyone to hear. You were taking pictures for Mom's story, right before the timer went off, when she was correcting my position. Marla's head whipped toward Tessa. "Tessa, do not you dare!" "You took a picture, didn't you?" "Tess?" I continued, ignoring Marla. "Of me, by the oven. Just show them the picture. Show them the live photo." "Tessa, I am warning you," Marla hissed, taking a step toward her. "Tessa," my father said. His voice was dead, hollow. He was not looking at Marla. He was looking at his youngest daughter. "Show me." Tessa's hand was shaking so violently she could barely unlock her phone. She looked at her mother, her eyes wide with a terror I had known my entire life. Then she looked at me, and her expression hardened. Her fingers fumbled on the screen. She opened her photo gallery. She scrolled to the photo timed at 5:09 in the afternoon. She held the phone out, her small hand trembling in the center of the room. It does it automatically," she whispered. She pressed her thumb to the screen. The tiny, bright screen came to life, the still image, a blurry, chaotic shot of the kitchen counter and my arm, suddenly animated. It was only 3 seconds long. It played in a silent, perfect loop. The entire room seemed to lean in, watching the tiny, damning film. We saw Marla's face, not smiling, her eyes narrow, her mouth forming the word, ruining. We saw her hand clamp onto my upper arm. We saw her yank me, a violent, off-balance shove. We saw my body slam backward into the hot, open edge of the oven door. We saw my face contort, my mouth opening in the silent gasp that the audio file had preserved. We saw Marla let go, her expression not one of shock or apology, but of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Tessa's thumb stayed on the screen. The loop played again, the shove, the impact, the gasp, again, the shove, the impact, the gasp. The lie was not just exposed, it was executed. The truth played over and over on a 2-inch screen. Graham made a sound, a low, guttural moan, as if he had been physically struck. His shaking hands rose to his face. He turned to his wife. "Marla?" he whispered. The word was broken. "Marla, what did you do? You shoved her. You burned her. My God. Marla, what did you do?" That was the moment her world ended. The exposure, the proof, the look on my father's face. It broke her, her sanity, her composure, her entire curated self, fractured. "It is a trick!" she shrieked, the sound inhuman. "It is all a trick! You are in on it with her!" She glared at Tessa, her face a mask of pure betrayal. You traitor! You set me up!" Marla lunged. She did not lunge at me. She did not lunge at my father. She lunged at her own daughter. She dove across the corner of the table, her hands like claws, trying to snatch the phone. "Give me that phone! Give it to me!" Tessa, who had flinched from shadows her entire life, did the one thing Marla had never anticipated. She stood her ground. She yanked the phone back, clutching it to her chest, shielding it with her body. "No! Give it to me! Tessa! I am your mother!" Marla screamed, grabbing her daughter's arm, trying to pry her fingers loose. "No!" Tessa shrieked, her voice cracking with 15 years of compressed fear and rage. "I will not. I already deleted everything for you. I deleted so many things. I deleted the video last year when you threw the coffee mug at her. I deleted the texts where you called her. I deleted everything. I am not deleting this. I am not." The sight of this, a mother and daughter physically fighting over the evidence of an assault, was the final straw for the guests. This is monstrous," Mrs. Parker said, her voice shaking. She was not whispering anymore. She was addressing the room. "Marla, the violence is one thing, but the money." She stepped forward, her husband trying to restrain her, but she shook him off. "Last spring, your Warm Hearth Initiative made a promise, a public promise. You stood up at the town meeting and said you were funding the repairs for the community center kitchen. You said our donations would do it." Marla froze, her hand still locked on Tessa's wrist. "We waited," Mrs. Parker continued, her voice gaining strength, the voice of a woman who has run a dozen PTA fundraisers and knows exactly when she is being lied to. The center waited. They bought the supplies. They hired the contractor. And then, suddenly, the check never came. Your foundation sent a letter. The funds had been reallocated due to unforeseen administrative costs. The project was canceled. Those children, Marla, they did not get their new kitchen. The stove is still broken. She gestured, her hands sweeping across the opulent dining room, at the flowers, at the stacks of antique plates, at the gleaming silver. And here it is. Here are the administrative costs. This china, that new car you are driving, this lie. She is right, I said, my voice cutting into the horrified silence. The administrative costs were, in fact, very high. I held up my own phone. The screen was lit, showing the sent confirmation of my email to the bank. Which is why I am sure you will all be relieved to know that, as of 30 minutes ago, all assets in my mother's trust are frozen. I sent the bank's compliance department the same evidence you all just saw. The Voss Financial Services contract has been immediately suspended, pending a full criminal fraud investigation. If Marla's face had been pale before, it was now the color of ash. The money, the real money, the well from which she had been drinking was dry. She let go of Tessa's arm. She was finished. She had no one. Her audience was a jury. Her daughter was a witness. Her husband was a casualty. There was only one person left to hold responsible. She turned, slowly, to face my father. "You," she whispered, her voice a low, terrifying hiss. "This is your fault. You let her do this. You let her walk into my home, the home I built, and destroy our family. You were weak. You have always been weak." I, Graham stammered, his hands fluttering at his sides. "You gave me access," she spat, her voice rising. "You told me to handle it. You told me. I do not want to be bothered with the details. Marla, you are so good at this. Marla, you let me." My father's face was a mask of dawning, sickening horror. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. He was remembering. I gave you the password," he breathed, his voice distant, as if he were watching a memory on a screen. "For the bank, the household account. I said it was convenient. For the charity donations. For the warm hearth." His eyes met mine. He understood. He finally, truly understood. His avoidance was not a shield. It was the weapon. He had handed her the gun. He had paid her to rob him, to rob his community, and to steal from his own dead wife. His passivity was the deepest complicity of all. Marla was done. The performance was over. The theater was burning. She grabbed her designer purse from the sideboard. "I am leaving. I will not stay here and be insulted." She stormed through the living room, toward the front door. The guests parted. A silent, disgusted wave. She reached the foyer. She grabbed the heavy brass handle of the front door. She twisted. The handle did not turn. The deadbolt did not retract. She pulled, harder. The door was solid, immovable. A small, insidious red light was glowing on the smart lock's keypad. Locked. "What is this?" she hissed, rattling the handle. "What is this? Graham? What did you do?" My father was still standing by the dining table, his own phone clutched in his trembling hand. The screen was on. I locked it," he said, his voice hollow. Marla whipped around, her face a mask of disbelief. "You locked me in? Are you insane? You are holding me hostage?" "No," Graham said. He looked exhausted. He looked 20 years older. "No, I saw you. I saw you and Tessa, fighting. I did not want anyone to run off, to drive away. I just wanted everyone to calm down." His voice cracked. "I just wanted us to sit and talk. We have to talk about this." It was the most pathetic, ironic, and utterly tragic thing he had ever done. The one time he finally tried to take control of his family, he used the very smart technology that had documented his failure, all in a desperate, foolish attempt to force the conversation he had spent his entire life avoiding. Marla threw herself against the door, pounding on the heavy oak with her fists. "Let me out! Graham, let me out of this house! Let me out!" The guests stared, horrified by this final, bizarre, and humiliating turn of events. I walked out of the dining room. I walked past my sister, who was crying, her body shaking. I walked past my father, who was staring at his phone, his face gray. I stood in the hall, looking at the woman who had terrorized me, now beating on a door she could not open. "No one is locked in, Marla," I said. My voice echoed in the terrible, quiet hall. She stopped pounding, her hands still flat against the wood. She turned, her face streaked with tears and rage, to look at me. "We are just not allowed to escape the truth anymore." The front door remained a solid, impassive barrier. The little red light on the smart lock was the only spot of color on Marla's face as she stared at it, her reflection pale and distorted in the polished brass. The sound of her desperate pounding had finally stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. The guests had not moved. They were a ring of statues, witnesses to a complete societal collapse. My father, Graham, was still clutching his phone, his face a roadmap of dawning, sickening understanding. His desperate, foolish act of locking the door had trapped us all, turning the house into a pressure cooker. I looked at him, I looked at Tessa, who was no longer sobbing, but was now just breathing in ragged, broken hitches. I looked at Marla, her back to us, a figure of total defeat. This was the moment. The data had been presented. Now, the terms of the settlement. "I am not here to destroy this family," I said. My voice was low, but it carried in the dead still air. "I am here to stop the lies, the ones you tell us, and the ones you tell yourselves." Marla turned around slowly. Her face was a ruin. "What do you want, Rowan? Money? Is that it? You want the house?" "I want 3 things," I said, taking a step into the center of the living room, placing myself between my family and the guests. I felt like I was at a boardroom table. "First, effective immediately, you, Marla, are suspended from managing any and all family assets. That includes my father's accounts, any joint holdings, and especially my mother's trust, which is already frozen. You will have no more access, no passwords, no sign-in privileges, nothing. Second, full restitution. Every dollar taken from the Warm Hearth Initiative must be accounted for and repaid. That means the $5,000 for the china, the money for Tessa's car, and every other administrative fee you paid to your shell company, the Parkers, and everyone else who donated, will be refunded in full, with interest, so they can send their money where it was actually supposed to go, the community center kitchen. And third," I said, my voice dropping, "a public apology, not a social media post, a written formal apology to the board of the Giving Table auction, to the community center, and to every single donor you defrauded." Marla let out a sound, a half laugh, half sob. "You cannot be serious. You are a child. You cannot demand." "I am not asking," I said, "and I am not a child." Graham finally moved. He pushed himself off the wall, his movements stiff, ancient. He looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time. "She is right. It is over, Marla." He walked to the console table, his hands shaking so much he could barely operate his phone. "Hollis, I need Hollis." He found the number, he pressed it, and he hit the speakerphone button. The room filled with the sound of a ringing phone, an absurdly normal sound in the wreckage of our lives. "Hollis Park speaking?" The voice was crisp, professional, the sound of billable hours. "Hollis, it is Graham Ellison." There was a pause. "Graham? It is 6:30 on Thanksgiving night. Is everyone all right?" "No," Graham said. his voice cracking. No, Hollis, we are not. I have a situation here. A legal emergency. What kind of emergency? My father looked at me, his eyes pleading. He did not have the words. I stepped forward. Mr. Park, my name is Rowan Ellison. I am Graham's daughter. The emergency is this. I have just presented my father and his wife, Marla Voss, with indisputable, third-party verified evidence that Marla has been operating a fraudulent charitable foundation, the Warm Hearth Initiative. The line was silent. I heard a muffled sound, like Hollis Park putting down a glass. Go on? She has been using it as a pass-through to a private LLC, Voss Creative Partners, to launder donations and purchase personal assets, including a car and household goods. She also, using my father's digital credentials, fraudulently appointed a second shell company, Voss Financial, as a paid manager on my mother's trust, from which she has been stealing. My God, Hollis breathed. Graham, is this true? Yes, Graham whispered, his face in his hands. It is all true. My daughter she has all the proof, the bank statements, the shell companies, everything. Rowan, Hollis said, his voice now sharp, all business. What is the immediate situation? The immediate situation, I said, is that the donors are in this room, and I have just proposed terms. The first is that Marla is stripped of all financial access. The second is full restitution. That is not a proposal. That is a necessity, Hollis snapped. Graham, you need to be at my office at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We are filing for an immediate emergency injunction against Marla. We are freezing all joint assets, and we are appointing an independent and third-party administrator for everything, all charitable funds, all trusts. From this moment on, neither you nor Marla will touch a single dollar of that money without court supervision. Do you understand me? Yes, Graham said, nodding. Yes, Hollis, thank you. And the donors, Hollis continued, tell them I will personally oversee a full, independent forensic audit of this Warm Hearth beginning next week. We will find every penny. I will bring in an outside auditor, and we will dissolve the foundation, the restitution. That will be part of the legal agreement. Graham, this is very, very serious. I understand, Graham said. Mrs. Parker stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. Mr. Park? My name is Diane Parker. My husband and we were donors. We do not want our money back. We want the community center to get its kitchen. Me too, my Aunt Clara called out. We will just donate again, directly this time. Then that is what we will do, Hollis said. Once the funds are recovered, we will liquidate them and make a single, supervised donation directly to the community center. You have my word on that. Marla had been watching this exchange, this public dismantling of her life, as if she were outside her own body. She looked at me, her eyes suddenly calculating. She was trying to find a move, a final bargain. Rowan, she said, her voice a low, placating whisper. Take down the presentation, your files, whatever you sent to the bank. Take it back. We can fix this. I will pay you. From my personal account, I will pay you back for your mother's trust. We can just handle this, the four of us. I looked at her. She still did not get it. She was still trying to buy my silence, to hide the data. It is not a post you can delete, Marla, I said quietly. This is not about the bank. This is about your conscience, and the file is not for sale. Rowan. Tessa, who had been silent, finally spoke. She stood up, wiping her streaming, tear-stained face with the back of her hand. He's right, Mom, she whispered. It is over. She turned to me. Her face was a ruin of shame and a tiny, flickering spark of courage. Rowan, I am so sorry. Her voice broke. I am so sorry. For all the years. For For tonight. For always. For always looking away. I am so scared of her. I know, Tessa, I said. It was all I could manage. But I want to help, she said. She looked at her mother, her expression hardening. I want to help you. She turned back to me. Please, do not send her to prison. It was a desperate, childish plea. She did a terrible thing, but please, give her a chance, a conditional one, the one you said, please. She was begging for her mother, but her actions were for me. She held out her phone, the phone with the live photo, the phone she had been guarding with her life. Here, she whispered. You should have this. You should have all of it, she swiped, her fingers shaking. I am airdropping everything to you, all the pictures, all the texts she made me delete. I have them in a hidden folder. I backed them up. I did not know why, but I did. I am sending them to you, now. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A massive file transfer was incoming, the final piece of the case. She had been my silent, terrified archivist all along. The room was quiet. The legal path was set. The emotional one was still a wreckage. Graham. His call with Hollis finished. Turned to me. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The bluster, the avoidance, the confident shield of his work and his schedules. It was all gone. He was just a man, an old, tired man, looking at the daughter he had failed. Rowan, he started. His voice was thick. He had to stop, to swallow. Rowan, He looked at my arm, at the angry burn, now peeking out from my cuff. His face crumpled. I am sorry, he whispered. It was not a grand pronouncement. It was a shattered confession. I am so sorry. For today. For all of it. I did not see you. I did not want to see. And that is worse. I am so sorry. My girl, I did not see you. I held his gaze. I did not cry. I did not absolve him. I just nodded. Once, the apology was registered. I accept your apology, Dad, I said, and the word Dad felt foreign, rusty. But this is the new boundary. This is the line. I have a file, a complete, unassailable file of everything. The fraud, the assault, the years of audio files and texts. I have it all. I am giving you this chance to fix it, the way Hollis laid out. I looked from him to Marla, who was now just a shell, slumped against the wall. But if this ever happens again, if there is one more accounting error, one more incident, one more hand laid on anyone in this house in anger, I will not call Hollis. I will email that entire file to the district attorney and to every news outlet in this state. It is not a threat. It is a data-backed promise. We are done with secrets. Hollis's voice suddenly came back through the speakerphone, which was still on. And I will be the one to testify. Rowan, the audit is set for this coming Monday, 9 a.m. I am bringing in an independent team. It is over. Marla, do you understand that? The game is over. Marla just slid down the wall, sinking to the floor in the foyer, her beige sweater bunching around her, her face in her hands. My father, his hand still on his phone, finally looked at the smart lock app. He pressed the screen. The front door gave a dull thud click as the deadbolt retracted. The path of escape was clear. The guests, one by one, began to move. Mrs. Parker walked over to me, her hand briefly, warmly, touching my good arm. Thank you, she whispered. You are a brave young woman. We will be at that town meeting. Mr. Parker just nodded at my father, his face a mask of profound disappointment, and guided his wife out the door. My Aunt Clara and Uncle David followed, Clara giving Tessa a long, sympathetic look. One by one, the jury filed out, leaving just us, the four of us, in the ruins. For the first time all day, the house was truly, completely quiet. It was not the tense, brittle silence of avoidance, of unsaid things. It was not the silence of fear. It was the heavy, exhausted, and absolute silence of the truth finally being told. I looked at the dining table. The magnificent 20-pound turkey was untouched, its skin now cooled and wrinkled. The buttery potatoes had congealed. The perfectly arranged green beans were cold. The entire glittering picture of Marla's perfect Thanksgiving was a cold, abandoned wasteland. Tessa, her tears finally drying, looked at the table, then at me. I am starving, she whispered, a small, absurd admission. I looked at the congealed food. I looked at my father, who was staring at his empty chair. I looked at Marla, still crumpled by the door. Slowly, I walked to the table. I picked up a plate, the antique, gold-rimmed, fraudulent Limoges china. I looked at Tessa. I looked at my father. Well, I said, my voice aching with exhaustion, we might as well eat. I picked up the heavy serving spoon and dug it into the cold mashed potatoes. The decisions were hot, but the food was cooling. We sat down, not as a perfect picture, but as survivors, finally, at the same broken table. We sat, the four of us, Graham, Tessa, me, and Marla, who had eventually, silently, pulled herself up from the floor by the front door. She had walked to the table like a sleepwalker, her face completely blank, and had taken her designated seat at the far end. She was a hollowed-out version of the woman who had started the day. Her beige sweater, once a symbol of curated perfection, now looked like a faded, rumpled shroud. The dining room was a battlefield after the ceasefire. The food, the magnificent 20-pound turkey, sat cooling in the center of the table, untouched. Its skin, once a perfect, glistening bronze, was now dull and wrinkled. The mashed potatoes were a congealed, buttery mass. The air was thick with the smell of cooling fat and stale wine. My father picked up the heavy carving knife. He held it over the bird, his hand trembling. He looked at it, then at us, at the wreckage of his family, and set the knife back down. He did not have the strength to carve it. The silence was absolute, heavier and more suffocating than all the shouting and accusations had been. Before we try, I said, my voice quiet, I just need one last minute, one last thing. A collective flinch went through the room. My father closed his eyes, bracing himself. Tessa looked down at her lap. Marla did not move at all. I am not going to play the whole thing again, I said. Seeing their fear, I pulled out my phone. Just the one part that started this, the part that matters most. I tapped my screen. I did not need the whole house audio. I connected just to the small smart speaker on the dining room console, the volume low, intimate, just for us. I went to the audio file, the one labeled Oven 10. Thanksgiving. I scrolled to the precise timestamp. I hit play. A single sound, dispassionate and clear, filled the quiet room. My father's voice. Turkey's burning. I stopped the playback. The echo of his words hung in the air. I looked at him, not with anger, but with a cold, clear sadness. You were right. Dad, something was burning. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. It was not the turkey, I said, my voice soft. It was the whole thing, the whole perfect, curated lie. It was the way we smiled for the photos while the house was on fire. It was the way we ignored the person who was screaming. Because we were too busy looking at the clock. That is what was burning. It has been burning for a long, long time. Tonight, it just finally burned down to the studs. Graham stared at the cold, useless oven mitts on the sideboard, the ones he had grabbed instead of helping me. He reached out and touched the thick, quilted fabric as if it were an artifact from another life. He picked them up, one in each hand, weighing them. He looked at them, then at me. Slowly, deliberately, he put the mitts down on the table. It was a gesture of final surrender. He pushed his chair back. He stood up, He walked the few feet to my side. He did not touch me. He did not try to hug me. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on my arm, on the angry purple-black bruise and the weeping, blistered line of the burn, which I had not bothered to cover. He looked at it, really looked at it, his eyes tracing the map of the damage he had allowed. "I see it," he whispered. His voice was thick, broken. It was not an apology, not this time. It was a statement of fact, a witness testimony. My God, Rowan, I see it. That simple admission, that final acknowledgement, broke the last thread of resistance in the room. At the far end of the table, Marla let out a sound. It was not a sob, but a low, shuddering exhale, as if she had been holding her breath for a decade. "I did it," she whispered. The table was silent. "I did it," she said again, louder, the words tearing out of her, raw and ugly. "The money, the foundation, it started as just a little thing, a silly little thing, a way to feel important, to build something that was mine." She looked at Graham, her eyes hollow. "You had your firm, your whole world. Rowan had her prizes, her intelligence, her escape. Tessa had her friends, her school, her youth." Her voice cracked. "I had nothing but this house, this image, this brand, this perfect, empty brand." Her hands were shaking so violently she ped them in her lap, trying to hide them. And then it got bigger. The auction, the car. It was so easy. It was just numbers on a screen. I told myself it was fine, that I was paying it back, that it was just creative accounting. But it was theft. I know it was theft. I stole. She looked at me, her eyes red, swollen, all the fire and venom gone, leaving just a cold, gray ash. And today, Rowan, I do not know. I do not know who that was. I get so angry. The control. I need the picture to be perfect, and when it is not, when you were not, I snap. I do not even know I am doing it until it is too late, until I have broken something. She took a ragged, desperate breath. "I need help. I know I do. I will pay it all back. Every cent, even if I have to sell this house. I will pay it all back. The trust, the donors, all of it. Just, please, I will get help. I will go to anger management. I will do whatever Hollis says, whatever the lawyer, whatever you say. Just give me time. I will fix it." She was bargaining, not for her freedom, not for her reputation. She was bargaining for a single, last chance at her own humanity. I looked at her, this broken, pathetic woman who had been my personal monster for more than half my life. The cold, analytical part of me saw only a failed system. The part of me that had wanted to destroy her was gone. I just felt tired. "Hollis is overseeing the repayment," I said, my voice firm, but not unkind. "That is not negotiable. It will be legally supervised. Every asset will be audited. You will pay back the donors, and you will pay back my mother's trust." She nodded, sniffling, a shred of gratitude in her eyes. "And the therapy," I continued, "that is also not negotiable. You will enroll, you will go, and the court, and Hollis, will see the receipts for both." I paused. "This was never about destroying you, Marla. It was about stopping the damage. If you do the work, if you actually fix what you broke, that is all I am asking for. Repair, not destruction." A chair scraped on the hardwood floor. Tessa, who had been watching this exchange in silence, stood up. She did not just walk over, she picked up her heavy oak chair, the one from her side of the table, and carried it, her arms straining. She brought it around the table and set it down, deliberately, with a soft thud, right next to mine. The gap that had always existed between us, the one Marla had so carefully engineered and maintained, was gone. She sat down. She did not say anything. She just reached out, her hand still trembling, and placed it on top of my good hand, the one resting on the table. Her skin was cold. It was not an apology. It was an alignment. It was a promise. A phone buzzed on the sideboard, vibrating against the dark wood, making us all jump. Graham walked over to it. It was his. The screen lit up the dark corner. It was an email. The sender: Hollis Park. Subject: Fiduciary Documents and Audit Schedule. Graham read the first line, his voice numb. He's done it. He's already filed the preliminary injunction with the court, and he's sending the new trust authorization forms. A third-party administrator, effective immediately. The audit is scheduled for Monday, 9 in the morning. The digital world was already moving, correcting the error, building the new walls. The new reality was being notarized. I pushed my chair back. The throbbing in my arm had returned. A dull, hot pulse. The first cold pack was a useless, watery bag. I will be right back. I walked into the kitchen. It was a mess. Not a performative, photogenic mess, but a real one. Pots were cooling on the stove. Spoons were sticky on the counter. The smell of cold fat was heavy in the air. I went to the freezer and pulled out a new, hard-as-rock ice pack. I wrapped it in a thin dish towel and pressed it to the burn. The relief was sharp, immediate, grounding. As I stood there, I looked at the oven, the polished steel, the dark, reflective glass. It was no longer a monster. It was not a weapon. It was not a stage. It was not a cage where my reflection was trapped. It was just a steel box, a kitchen appliance. Its light was off. Its power was gone. I walked back into the dining room, my head held high, the cold pack a balm against my skin. I was not a victim in this house anymore. I was not a ghost. I was not an asset to be managed or a prop to be positioned. I was just Rowan. I sat down, back in my chair, with Tessa beside me. My father looked at the plates. He looked at the crystal water pitcher. He picked it up, his hand steadier now. He walked to Marla's side and poured her a glass of water. Her hand was shaking too much to lift it. He poured one for Tessa. He poured one for me. I picked up my glass. "From now on," I said, looking at each of them in turn, "we are done with this. We are not going to let any turkeys burning, any deadline, any schedule, any perfect picture cover up the sound of a real person in pain ever again." I took a sip. Graham looked at the massive, useless, perfect turkey. He let out a long, shuddering breath. Then, he reached for the silver lid on the serving tray next to it, the one holding the mashed potatoes. He lifted the cover. A small, pale cloud of steam rose from the dish. They were still, somehow, warm. There were no fireworks. There was no grand family reunion. There were no hugs. But my father picked up the heavy serving spoon, scooped a spoonful of potatoes, and put it on my plate, my real, fraudulent, antique plate. It was not forgiveness. It was not absolution. It was just food. It was just the quiet, heavy, unmistakable warmth of a meal. Finally being put on a table by people who were, at long last, seeing each other. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I need to know your thoughts. So please, let me know in the comments where you are listening from, and share what you felt. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, and like this video so more people can find it. And if you really want to support this story, please hit that hype button. It helps more than you know.